Good evening, everyone. I will call tonight's June 25th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Directors to order. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Coven, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. Before we get to tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Icestone and Eastham. I'm President Malone. To my left, Vice President Abraham and Directors Finch and Lingo and Board Secretary Coven. With that, I will dive into tonight's agenda. First item is community comment, and we do not have any. Moving on, is there approval of tonight's agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes vote too.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did directors have questions regarding the bills? Hearing none, are there any items directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda? I will be pulling the personnel agenda. Are there any other items? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I motion to approve.
Second.
All right. Board Secretary Coven, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to the item that was pulled from consent agenda. And I only pulled the personnel agenda because I have a personal relationship with a couple of people that's listed on that, and I would prefer to abstain from the vote. Are there any questions or comments related to the personnel agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the personnel agenda for June 25th, 2024.
Thank you. Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Eastham, Finch, Abraham, Lingo, and Icestone voting yea, and Director Malone abstaining.
Great, thank you. Next up is our presentation for tonight, the Annual Asset Protection Report.
All right, and as the only item on the agenda, I feel like I should really dig into this and go a long time, but I promise I won't. I just want to provide a really quick recap. This is an overview of our insurance policies for the coming year, primarily focused on property liability, hardware break fix, cyber, and workers' comp. But then also I'll touch a little bit on health insurance as well. So we are members of the Iowa Public School Insurance Program. That's a district-owned, and by district-owned I mean jointly among 17 districts, district-owned consortium. And being a member of that really allows us to achieve a number of benefits, but two really primary benefits. One of them is that it allows us to spread risk across that entire pool. And then the other is that it allows us to maximize buying power. And increasingly, I'm sure you've seen in the news, it's becoming harder and harder for homeowners, business owners, et cetera, to buy property insurance, that sort of thing. We have not run into some of the challenges that other districts have, and in part, that's because of the buying power of our larger pool as part of that consortium. So ultimately, it helps us drive down prices a little bit. It helps us stabilize prices, but especially in this market, whether we're talking about property insurance or cyber liability, it allows us to purchase insurance that we may run into challenges purchasing otherwise. So we're a part of the IPSIP pool, and that's a professionally managed group. So it's not me going out and negotiating for insurance coverage. We have a professional management group that does that for us. I've provided information that's available in that ICCSD premium comparison attachment as it relates to our changes to our insurance costs. One thing to note is that if you take a look at that attachment, you'll see that our IPSIP proposed 2024-2025 amount is up pretty substantially across really all categories. If you go down all the way to If you go all the way to the bottom, there's a grand total line, and you can see that the total increase there is $642,000, which is about 13.96%. Taking out that equipment breakdown line, which is just fixed at 5%, that really results in essentially a 16% increase in our premium costs. We budgeted for 20, and so we are within the amount that we budgeted there. I'll pause for a second to determine whether we want to.
No. Are we?
Chase
where
is
it?
gonna
Yeah.
go check it out for us
Okay.
a little bit. He'll come back with an
I'll keep
update.
going then.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Ultimately, we do have, like I said, that 16% increase in our insurance premiums. We did budget for 20. All of these expenses for these insurance premiums come from the management fund. Everything except our health insurance premiums are management fund and have no impact on the general fund, no impact on our unspent authorized budget. So those are a couple important things to keep in mind. One nice surprise that I should actually point out, one of the big drivers of our premium increase was a substantial increase, about 28% or $200 million in our property valuations. So our total insured valuations are up to about $905 million from $705 million, $704 million the year prior. That was an IPSIP-wide appraisal that was done because the managers of the pool felt concerned that we were underinsuring our property. So something we'd want to do on a fairly regular basis, but that's why we saw that substantial jump there. I wouldn't anticipate a similar one in the next couple of years. One nice surprise is we did see a decline in our cyber liability insurance premium, which is almost unheard of. Really speaks to the effectiveness of both the work that we're doing to mitigate cyber issues that result in claims, but then also across the entire pool, we're seeing that work being done, and so that's paying off. I do want to briefly mention health insurance. So this is something that we've touched on a decent amount as it relates to our budget reduction conversations. I attached the attachment for employee insurance coverage that really just summarizes the health and other employee insurance benefits for the fiscal year 2025 and highlights some of the changes, like I said, that we've discussed before, including some mid-year increases to copays, deductibles, and out-of-pocket maximums. There is a premium increase along with the employee cost for single coverage, which again was part of our budget reduction conversation to increase the member share of costs there a little bit. Ultimately, that's been implemented. The additional premium increase over that $65 contribution for individual certified and $30 for classified is being borne by the district. And the health insurance premiums are a general fund cost, which is why this was part of our budget reduction conversations. Comes back to that. With that, I will open it up for any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. It's a very good presentation. Can you just comment briefly on two aspects of our responsibilities of looking at our asset coverage provisions? One, how do we go about determining the proper amount of property and liability insurance. You've touched on property, the amount of property coverage. And then second, how do we, and I think maybe you touched on this too, how do we determine if the premiums we're paying are reasonable and fair?
Yep, that's good. Those are good questions. And ultimately, for the most part, those are pool decisions. So the coverage amounts are determined through collaboration with the other district members of the pool, along with the group that is involved in management of the pool. So when you look, for example, at the IPSIP summary of coverage page, right at the very top, it articulates business property, loss limits, going down sub-limits for different types of loss. When we look at excess property or going down further, looking at liability coverage, those limits are determined through the pool negotiating process. And if we were to increase those, we would do it through collaboration with the pool. And again, we're really to a great degree relying both on history and what our claims have been, whether these coverage levels are sufficient, but then also on those professional managers to make recommendations about whether we need to up certain coverage limits, that sort of thing. There are a couple of exceptions, and the biggest one is cyber liability, which we do have some control over as a district. It's also not a number that we share publicly, so certainly happy to go into closed session on that. But ultimately, that's something that, because varying size districts would have potentially substantially different needs, that's one that's determined at the district level. So that's how we make our decision as it relates to that particular aspect. In terms of whether we're getting good premiums, there are a couple of ways that I have a lot of confidence that we are. One of them is that when IPSIP is working through its renewals, the management group, which doesn't benefit from higher premiums, the management group is very transparent about, we put out requests for bids for this type of insurance. We received 18 bids. Here's what they were. Here's what we're recommending. So we see that competition. But really the more important way is talking to my peers in other districts, and both in terms of what their premiums are, as well as in terms of their struggles to obtain coverage in many cases. I think we're in a very good spot.
Okay, thank you. It's very helpful.
Any additional questions or comments? Thank you for that presentation. And that takes us to agenda setting. You will see that we have a work session scheduled at 5 o'clock on July 23rd. The conversation will be on elementary configuration, and we will circle back to part of the conversation we were having tonight regarding the natatorium in Coralville. And that takes us to our regularly scheduled meeting and the agenda. We have a presentation as well as a couple of discussion items related to cell phones and legislative priorities. And I saw Superintendent Degner pull down his microphone. I think he wanted to add something.
You did pretty good. You got most of what's on my list here. So I was just going to mention for the cell phones, I really think what we would like to present to you that night with that item is basically like an engagement plan about how we would pursue the issue. So just so you know what to expect, instead of a conversation that you would need to be prepared for about stating opinions or having some informed statements on that, what we'd really like to do is really present an engagement plan about how we could pursue that conversation. And then President Malone mentioned the operations reports as well. I think if not, we would definitely like to have those on that agenda. And you already addressed the items for the work session and the legislative priorities. So that's all I had.
Great. And we will review during agenda setting the parking lot items just to see if I thought that was one other thing,
The audit?
the audit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When-
the
when
audit
we
should
set the audit.
be for July, and if not, it'll be that first August meeting, but we're targeting July per the email you guys got today from Adam.
Okay, so it will be on this meeting.
That's our goal,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Just a reminder, before I adjourn, we do have a closed session immediately following this. Hearing nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.